Alrighty, chaps. So continuing on from our conversation, the last time we were talking about creating an alternate consciousness that would be kind of similar but would start diverging away. What we could do to make this interesting, and there's so many different threads that we can pull at, so many different directions we can go at. What we could do to make this a bit interesting is to form a subsidiary thought experiment within this experiment where you live in a controlled environment, you and your other consciousness who's just been created atom by atom by mapping every single atom of yours and where it's placed at, and then recreating that, and yeah, having you dwell in the same place where everything's done in a very controlled environment, right? It would be interesting to now. I don't think that the results would be the same, as in the outcomes would be the same because of the probabilistic nature of consciousness and the quantum nature of consciousness. It would be interesting to see how the divergences bear out. I think that we can't really speculate in any definite direction. Our models of consciousness are based on everything I've read. I don't think that our guesses would be intelligent enough. And the reason I say that they won't be intelligent is obviously I've got certain, like, the models of reality need to, for my own self, right? I can fight against that bias because I'm aware of that bias. But what happens with humans is that there's this bias of wanting things to conform with your models of the world, your models of reality, and what history has shown, be it the Copernican revolution, be it the Einsteinian revolution, be it the other revolutions, is that reality does not need to conform to your model, or it does not need to seem intuitive. It does not need to fit into what would seem neat and clean to you, right? Reality can be very complex, it can be very unintuitive, and if you just look at evolutionary history, you can see that we were chimps not a long time back, right? And we made leaps and bounds of progress in the last 500,000 years, but before then we were just glorified primates, right? We're still fighting like crazies over lust, over power, over territory. We are doing all sorts of things that we can observe in chimp societies and primate societies. This has been an aberration these last 5-6 centuries since the printing. I mean, you can start before then. Obviously, there have been moments which everything is built on top of the things that should come before, like the Magna Carta in the 11th century that kickstarted certain things. Before then, you can probably go back to the invention of, well, you don't need to go all the way back to the invention of writing. I guess you can go back to certain other things which elevated us as a class of species compared to our closest living cousins. But the point is that for us to assume that the reality has to make sense to us, and for us to give credence to a model of reality based on how much it makes sense, is an absolutely flawed model, and history has just proven that time and again. So that's a bias that I try to fight against all the time, not just for the big grand theories of the universe, consciousness, how the universe started, but even in things big and small. For example, if I had to make a call about a feature for a project I'm working on, I don't just ask myself that, does this make the most sense, right? Because people make something people want. That's a wise creator, right? And there's wisdom in that. Like, if you're just building something for yourself, and I do build stuff for myself, and I'll continue to build stuff for myself, then it's fine. Then your own taste is all that matters. But if you want to build something which has the maximal amount of impact, you've got to take into account all the things that your brain simply does not have the insight on, right? So talking with people, seeing how they process that particular thing, how they deal with that problem, how they would interact with that particular thing, right? And then just forming a model based on hundreds of these conversations, and that's how you come to a refined version of a feature set. So that's just one example of something that is basically fighting against your biases, right? Strong beliefs, loosely held. The loosely held part is the most important part, where we don't want to get attached to our models of reality, our own beliefs, our own assumptions. In many cases, right, there are certain the beliefs in a camp where you don't really want to fight them. You want to believe that those are the beliefs that you can just set them aside, right? So beliefs about you want to love your family, you want to do the best, be the best for your family, your friends, the people in your life. you want to serve humanity, you want to, never give up in the face of, dejection, odds, seemingly insurmountable odds, right? So those are beliefs that you should put in the bucket where you don't really question those. But then there are beliefs about, for example, if you're a stock trader, let's say you're in Nassim Taleb, who used to work in the stock industry, and he's notoriously good at being able to create, well, to be able to underwrite his mental models, underwriting your models of reality. This is a Chamet Palapatia phrase I just have come to love, right? Just when you come across something new, we're supposed to talk about reality, about consciousness, and we're just talking about this, right? It's fine. Right, so going back to that, right? So you're going to stop diverging away from your alternate consciousness. We don't know how, but it would be fascinating to see those interactions. It would be fascinating to see the divergences. Yeah, it'd be fascinating to see. And then the certain things for which what would be really interesting. So in my particular case, I'm trying to build this company, which I don't know, I want to use a T word, but just to try to, just for the sake of the discussion, I think it makes sense for me to get into talk about those kinds of details, right? So the company in its actualized version, where if we do actualize the potential of it, it can be a mammoth company. Scope is immense. But if I'm competing, so if I've got a consciousness, if I've got another Suraj, let's call him Suraj 2.0, then we're competing for the same goal. How would that work out, right? So that'd be an interesting micro interaction. It wouldn't just be me talking about something like what's the nature of consciousness, what's the meaning of life, something of that sort, where I can almost predict completely what my Siraj 2.0, I suppose, is going to say, right? But in this case, where I'm trying to build a company, Siraj 2.0, he cares about me. Hopefully he'll care about me. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But if we are living in this is a thought experiment, so let's just assume that this is the reality. He would care about me because I think I'm the sort of person who's got a lot of love in my heart, especially for people close to me, and who would have a lot of love in my heart and that Suraj would have a lot of love in his heart for the people close to him. And so my own alternate self would obviously be one of those very close people. It would be like my children or my partner or my parents, that close. The question becomes, what happens to the game theoretic dynamics when we are competing for the same prize? The prize is a trade. Now the money, the scope, all of that doesn't matter to me. It's the impact, right? But again, it's going to be the same motivating factor for the $1 trillion. It's not meant to talk about the size of the prize. It's meant to lead to the impact that prize could have. Yeah. So that'd be an interesting question. That if we're competing for the same prize, like impacting the world in the way that we want to, or even, this would be actually very interesting, right? I do want to change my mind in this. I think it'd be lovely for me to have a family. And absolutely, it's one of the things I want the most in life after this stage, after 7 years or whatever. Well, 7 years roughly. And I would love to have got the version of the kind of partner I would want to have in my life, right? I also understand that the odds of finding this kind of a person, because there are probably 3 to 5 people on this planet of 8 billion who fit those criteria, those minimal acceptable criteria. And so for the odds of finding that person in this random, chaotic world that we live in are pretty slim to none. Now I'm going to do things to maximize those chances. I don't want to go into those things right now, but the point is I'm going to do, because it's like one of the most consequential things, the person that you decide to spend your life with, obviously your partner, and the person that you decide to build your family with, right? Because your legacy, apart from the legacy of your companies, the companies you build, the technologies that you incubate, that you invent, it's your family, it's your children that you're going to leave behind. And that's obviously a 2-person job if you want to have the best upbringing for those kids, right? For those children. So I would love to have a partner who's aligned with me on the way I think about things. Anyways, the point is that also finding this kind of a person are slim to none, right? Now let's say that there's one person, found that person, and then we're in this world where my clone is actually in that world, right? This would make for a really weird sci-fi movie plot. I think it would. I'm sure that someone's actually cooked this up somewhere, right? So you and your alter consciousness, which is almost the same as you, are fighting for this one prize where only one person can get this prize. I'm not gonna say that my partner would be a prize per se. I just mean it in the sense that, like, that's one of the most important things to me, right? Having that kind of a partner, building that kind of a relationship. And so if there's just, so that'd be an interesting. Those would be some interesting dynamics. I don't think that we would get to fisticuffs, but it would be, yeah. I don't know. It cannot, like, I'm trying to predict my own behavior in that scenario. Like, would I just want to say, okay, you know what, you're the same as me, you're going to do the same job as me in terms of raising that family, leaving that legacy of that family behind, so I'll let you, yeah. I mean, would we be competing? That, it'd be so interesting. I think this would be the most interesting scenario of all the possible scenarios that I can cook up right now. I'm sure there are scenarios that I can cook up that might be more interesting, but this is one in particular that is very interesting. Anyways, let us put a bow on this. Let's talk about another type of conscious uploading, right, which is far closer to our present moment, which is uploading your consciousness into a digital device, into a digital substrate. So I'm going to talk about silicon right now, but then we can talk about neuromorphic computing, neuromorphic brains, where our company is going to do a ton of work. We're going to push the envelope in terms of it being a path to alignment. Again, I don't want to go into the details right now. That's for a separate conversation. So we can upload. We'll probably be able to upload our consciousness. When I say consciousness, very limited facets of it. Like, you'll be able to, like, so what is your consciousness, right? It's like your thoughts, your memories, and the way these memories, well, forget about your thoughts, right? What are your thoughts? Basically, your thoughts are electrical impulses in your brain, right? Where that these objects, the memories, when I say memories, these are like, you've got memories of these objects, right? So you've got a map of objects. And so thoughts are basically combining these objects in a way that is cohesive, that makes sense, right? And most of our thoughts are actually, I don't think I've had really unintelligible thoughts. So that's very interesting. Actually, let me just take a step back then. What is it that, so most of my thoughts are, they're pretty lame, they're pretty boring, pretty vanilla, nothing insightful. But most of my thoughts still make sense, right? Like, sometimes I find myself ruminating, so repeating the same thoughts. But the point is that most of my thoughts, they make sense. It's not like, I'm just like with a chat GPT, we used to call it 3.5 stochastic parrots, because 3.5 kind of models were like stochastic parrots, like they could just say things unintelligibly. Now, it's not like these GPT-4o models or Gemini Pro models or Claude 3.5 models that become intelligent. It's just that we've crossed the valley of them understanding, having the level of awareness that they would need to not give stupid answers like the pre-3.5 models did. Like especially 2 models, right? GPT-2 models, they were really stupid. Like, they would just spew nonsense. Like, you could ask you a question and just give you nonsense, gibberish, right? So our brains don't do that. Or it could be that we have a filter which prevents those kinds of really stupid thoughts to. I think that would be a really inefficient way for our brain architecture to operate. I do think that most of our thoughts are, at least, they need to be intelligible for our brain to create those in the first place. So what would be interesting to look at, among many other things over here, is what exactly is that mechanism which comes in before the thought has been formulated, which creates this intelligent thought, which has some cohesion with reality, with your reality. So that's interesting, yeah. Okay, anyways, that's an aside. The whole point of this conversation is I want to just take some threads out of the notion of, uploading your brain, having another consciousness, and just see those threads as alternate conversations or alternate, directions of research, right? For me, and maybe, if you are interested as a listener, if anyone's listening to this, so what'd be interesting is, what would what does uploading consciousness entail, right? In the substrates of silicon brains, basically. I think it involves uploading. Basically, you'd have to, again, I'm not well versed with, like, Neuralink could be one way of doing this, right? So you put a chip in your brain that maps out all the electrical activity and then creates digital version of all the electrical activity, right? So, okay, I think I've got it. So you got your brain, and when you think about a certain object, a certain part of your brain lights up. When you do certain things, certain parts of your brain light up, right? So you could have a chip that observes these interactions over hundreds of days, thousands of days, and so now it's got a really good model of your brain. That, okay, in this part of my brain, there's this memory, and the memory, it's not just a memory per se, as in it's connected, it's mapped onto this object, but it's a fully fledged memory, right? So memory about, let's say when if I was like, I do actually have that memory. With my family, I'm very young, with my family at the beach, and it's stormy and very gloomy seeming, and yeah, the waves are strong. My brother, he's just in the deep end. I'm in the deep end too. I'm wondering whether he's actually sinking or what the hell's wrong with him. So I've just gone to rescue him. Yeah, so that's a memory in my brain that is deeply embedded, right? What could happen is that Neuralink could, does your brain have to remember? So again, if your brain thinks about something, then sure, Neuralink can map that onto that part of the brain, right? But what about subconscious memories, where you don't really consciously think about, like, a lot of stuff in your childhood, you don't really actually think about that? So how would we actually get that off the brain and into the silicon substrate, right? So that's a question that I'm sure that still, like, for this we had to wonder about how memory is encoded in our neurons, right? So with computers, we've got bits. So every memory is built out of bits, right? So if it's a sentence, if you've got a book, then the book is made of letters. Each letter is represented by some bits. So basically, you can reduce everything down to bits. Same with pixels, right? You can reduce all the pixels down to, and those are so that's obviously text and then media. And then again, with sounds, all of it's just bits all the way down. With the brain, we don't have a good model. I was doing some research about this a while back because I was really fascinated by this question. I was really obsessed with this question of how do we encode memories and we don't really have any good answers. Until we figure out how we encode memories in our neurons, I don't think we'll be able to upload subconscious memories, and that would leave almost everything on the table, right? Like, there's only so much you can relay. Like, if you do create a consciousness based on your just conscious thoughts over even thousands of days of Neuralink mapping that out, I think it's going to be severely limited, because so many of your behaviors, so many of your drivers, your biases, a lot of this is just subconscious, especially for most people. Like, there are a handful of people who tend to go deep, who tend to question, and there are simple-minded people who don't have much stuff to begin with. But for a lot of people, they don't have the tools. The brains are a jumbled mess, so it'd be really difficult. So that's one part of it, right? But let's say that we can upload it. It'd still be materially different to the consciousness that you have in your body, because your body has an embodied consciousness, right? So you want to eat food, you want to mate, you want to seek power, which allows you to maximize the odds of doing both those things, which matters the most, right? So eating food is about survival, extending your lifespan so they can mate as many times as possible, just from an evolutionary point of view. So you want to do those, you want to do the things that allow you to maximize those two objective functions, basically. And if you take those away, and everything that, is built on top of the edifice, and, I like to think that you're better than just needing to eat and to, mate. You can transcend those things. At least I think I'll transcend those things. I think we can transcend those fundamental drivers to the degree that we don't need to be driven by those exclusively. Like, we could have higher desires and higher needs that push us and drive us to do things, right? And we've seen that with lots of monks who don't have any desire to want to seek power, to want to mate, to want to leave their progeny, to want to leave their genes behind, to want to, yeah, even food, they don't seek pleasure from food. Like they're just disconnected from the experience that most people have in life, which is, to gravitate towards satiating those fundamental drivers and desires. So we have a track record of thousands of humans, some who are exceptional at this, like the Buddhas of the world, the Jesus Christ of the world. Who else? Like I can think of some other people like that, the Swami Vivekanandas of the world. Yeah, there are people like that. There have been people like that, and there are still. I'm sure that there are people like that, and it would be an interesting question. How did these people come to be, right? Because it would seem like these people would seem like the worst thing for evolution to create. Now again, evolution is obviously an efficient process. It doesn't really like suicide before you are able to, before you pass on your progeny, which is quite common. Like it just sounds like the kind of strategy that would be quite counterintuitive, or counterproductive rather. So evolution, obviously, it's flawed. It's not a perfect system. So I guess the answer could be that these people just happen to be, and then these people realize that that there's an enlightened way to live beyond transcending your fundamental nature, your animal nature, and there's more bliss, there's more euphoria. They might not even care about euphoria. There's just more bliss in that state, and maybe for some people, for all sorts of reasons, because of the makeup. Like we obviously have to take this case by case, but I don't want to dwell too much on this. I think we made the point. Yeah, the question was that. Yeah, the point was that your brain, your consciousness of your uploaded brain would be materially different, because that consciousness, which is in a device, doesn't care about eating, doesn't care about mating, doesn't care about some of the other things. It might care about, wanting to create a positive impact in the world. It might care about sort of your higher motives, your higher desires and drivers, but it wouldn't care about those fundamental desires. So would it then make that, because it's not power seeking, would then make that uploaded entity a higher angel of your nature, where you uploaded even the subconscious stuff? We've assumed that in this case, the only thing that you haven't really got, the consciousness hasn't got, is embodied, right? Because our consciousness is connected to our body. If you remove the body part, we can recreate the consciousness completely and put it in a digital form, where the only thing that needs for survival is electricity, then you're talking of something that might be deemed to be the heart nature of our angel, in a very real sense. Yeah. Right, let's take this, if we can actually upload consciousness, or if consciousness is something that can be turned off. First of all, we gotta look at whether consciousness is linear or whether it's a step function, that something needs to happen and then it suddenly turns on, right? There are people both the schools of thought have very prominent people give really compelling arguments. There are people who believe that consciousness is on a scale, it's linear, even atoms are consciousness, so the panpsychism, I don't agree with that, I don't believe that, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, it could be true, right? I mean, it doesn't have to make sense, as we will discuss, but it's one of those theories that just doesn't sit right with me. And there are people that believe that consciousness can only happen at the level of complexity of human brains or beyond, right? So even animals might not be conscious. Some animals might be more conscious than others, like mammals would be more conscious than reptiles, but the kind of consciousness that can reflect on its own mortality, can look at it across time spans, not just in the current moment, can plan, can reason, forget about reasoning, but can plan because it can, look back and look front and learn from its mistake. That consciousness can only happen in the brain structure as complex and as rich as a human brain. Could be true, right? Could be true. My question is that if you can upload consciousness sequentially, rather than all in one go, rather than recreating it in one go, then we can create a version of the ship of Theseus experiment, where you got the ship. What you're doing is the ship is breaking down, it's rotting away, it's decaying, it's a wooden ship, right? So you're replacing the wooden plank, and over time, whenever they go bad, and over time, You replace you replace the entire ship, right? And we've seen this Great Wall of China. There are places where they've had to redo the whole section. We've seen this in countless of the monuments. I was in this historical place a few months back, which was like 250 years old. This is like a fort, a palace, and some parts of it were going bad. And they replaced it. They mentioned that we've had to replace it. Gave you the feel of the old. But the point is that that's the ship of Theseus experiment, how experiment in real time, right, in real world. What would happen if you did a version of that where you're uploading your consciousness bit by bit, bit by bit? At what point does that person become you? This is a question of your identity, right? Like, what parts of you are more integral? What parts of you are more fundamental to your nature, to your being? So yeah, loads of fascinating questions that are in this realm of alternate consciousness, and we are going to be pretty soon be able to recreate these consciousness in digital form, and probably within 20 years, 30 years, we'll be able to recreate entire people from scratch. Like, just as you could 3D print your own self. So we are going to see some really interesting interactions happen. Would I love to have a copy of me? I would love to. I would absolutely love to. Reminds me of the short film where there's there's this person who hates doing chores, and so he's recreated himself, and the job of his alter ego, his alter consciousness, is just to do the chores, right? So he doesn't have to deal with that. He just keeps on living life, and the alternate self can do the boring stuff, the hard stuff. And we could have versions of that, right? Because who are you most likely to trust? Like, your motivations inside out. Like, unless you're a narcissistic person, unless you are a psychopath, unless you are, I don't know, very sick in the head, unless you've got some dark demons in you, you should be, like, I personally would be able to trust myself the most. Like, even once I have family, even more than my kids, right? And I don't think trust is the right word to use here. Or maybe it is. But, like, if you know something, if you can see the inside of someone's brain, metaphorically speaking, like, if you can see all the thoughts that they have, all the drivers, all the motives, all the biases, if you can see their past, if you can see their patterns, everything right in front of you, because all of that is in you and you're aware enough of yourself to be able to see that, then wouldn't it stand to reason, like, that you would be the person that you would trust the most? If that's the case, wouldn't you want to have a copy of yours so that I can do some of the stuff? Like, hopefully I'll be running an enterprise that is, like, accelerating the trajectory of humankind, right? So it's going to be a massive enterprise. If I could have someone like me I can trust, like, not for ideas, because if we just talk, ideas are going to be pretty lame, but just in terms of execution, let's say that, meetings, that, like, I need to be in a certain meeting, I need to be in tons of meetings, like, that other entity, the other Suraj can handle some of those meetings, or I can handle some, like if you got 5 copies, that would be better than 2 copies. There obviously would be an optimal number. Beyond that, it might get crazy. I think the optimal number for me might be roughly 5. Another interesting thing which could happen is, what would sports look like, right? You're completely evenly matched. Like, if you're playing tennis, if it's 2v2 or 1v1, me playing against myself, like, what would that look like? So this is interesting because, this is where, obviously, sports is very chaotic. Smallest of things can make the largest of differences, right? Like, so, yeah, I think roughly you would see scores of 6-6 and then tie breaks 7-6. So if you're playing a 3-setter, it'd be like 7-6, 6-7 maybe for the other sets. And yeah, almost everything would probably go there. But it would be interesting in the sense that having a perfect clone of yours, the perfect recreation of your consciousness, would be interesting in the sense that it could represent you in places like, you gotta go to a party where people in your industry are meeting, and it's just something that you gotta do, and again, you're not really feeling, and you got to do that twice a week, right? And if that's not something that you absolutely love as a part of the deal that you signed up for, building an enterprise that is hopefully making a massive difference, then that's something you can offload to the other conscious. But then the question arises is that wouldn't that conscious also want, again, like if it's you, you can bargain and you can trust, and you'd be both be cognizant of the fact that you're coming from a place of good faith, and you, in all your conversations and all your interactions, that would be implicit. Sorry, that would have to be. In this case, it would be very implicit because you know yourself, or both of you know each other inside out. So that'd be interesting. I'd certainly love to have my clones. Yeah, but I wouldn't really be doing a ton of interactions with them. They'd be doing a lot of, like, we are going to have our digital copies online that represent us. That, for example, is going to start with work, right? We're going to train AI agents on our workflows. People are already working on this, by the way. These AI agents are trained on how people talk, how people interact, how people use their computers, how the people use their devices, all the different aspects, all the different parts of the pipeline that make for one's workflow. And these agents are going to be designed to replicate those functions so that people can get all the output they need to create while working a fraction of the time. And you can extend this to doing life stuff. So yeah, there's loads of relationships you need to maintain, like if you're a social person, and sometimes it can get exhausting, but you still like to have people in your life, right? But yeah, you don't want to go out sometimes with your friends or your partner or whatever, right? So again, you can offload a lot of that stuff to your perfect representation. Not even representation, the perfect copy. Like that Suraj would feel very offended at being called a copy, because if you put me in an X-ray device that can X-ray at the level of atoms, and if you put that person, that Suraj, in that same device, we would both be the same. Not the same, I mean, because of the chaotic nature of reality, we would probably have some of differences in our brains, but in terms of, no one would be able to say who was born, or who is the new one and who's the copy, who's the old one and who's the copy, right? I think that's going to happen pretty soon. So yeah, interesting times ahead. Yeah, I'll leave you with that question. Would you want to have your perfect clone in your life doing things for you, or just maybe someone that you might like as a thought partner? Yeah. Okay, that's it. Cheers.